So for simplicity, can you read Sridhar for the seven realities of the?
Okay, I can.
Sure, thank you. Meanwhile, I'm getting back
Let's
in
see.
control.
Yeah, the seven realities: existence, existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following seven realities. First, the only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. Second, the only real love is the love for this infinity God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. Third, the only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. Fourth, the only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. Fifth, the only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward. When compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try and make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feelings for one and for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. The only control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. Seventh, the only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Jai Baba. And now we are going to 221. Did you say that?
I think we are on page number 193.
193. Physical or the soft copy?
Physical.
Physical 193. Oh, yeah.
I'm talking on mute. I'm sorry. 201 on
201?
physical. Yeah, this is the page. That's the page.
It's 195.
Further, no, further down.
Further.
201. Yeah. I wanted you to type 221 in the soft copy. I'm talking on mute from that time. Yeah.
Types of meditation.
Types of meditation.
Yes.
Okay. Let me scroll down. Yeah.
So I know I didn't give notice, so I'll probably read for today. But this week, let's try different people reading the whole hour, just so that we get ready for post-lockdown, so that in case anybody is traveling, including myself, we are able to manage things. So is everybody able to see the screen?
I think Karthik, we are in reincarnation and karma, right? We finished all the. Yeah.
I think part 3 of.
Did we finish part 3 of Mango?
Yes,
I mean,
we finished
occultism?
part 3. Yes, we finished part 3. So that's what I was asking you when you joined at 7:20.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
So
okay,
do we go
now
to
it will be reincarnation and karma. Hard copy, page number 301.
301.
301 on the hard copy.
So 322, please. 322 on the top. You just type 322. That's easiest.
Where
Just
do I
go to
top?
the page field. The page field, right. Yes, little more right. There's a page number you can type in.
Here?
No. On the top. Yeah, on the top. Where you see 454, 290 or 454. Yeah, just enter that 290. Select that. Yeah, and you can just type
Yeah.
320.
290, is it? Yeah. I did
320, right? What was the number?
Is it 320?
Physical 307.
Karma.
301.
Physical 301.
301 plus 22 or something could add.
21.
Sorry,
Go further. I think you have to add.
Circle. Circle avatar? No.
Just type 322. That also works.
We are almost there at 322. Reincarnation and karma?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So who reads?
I can read. If you want, you can read as well. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll try.
Sure. Everybody can hear him clearly, right? So
Sure.
we're trying this out this week so that we are able to distribute the load of reading as well. So thank you, Sunil. Go ahead.
Okay, the significance of death. The worldly person completely identifies life with the manifestations and activities of the gross body. For him, therefore, the beginning and the end of bodily existence are also the beginning and the end of individualized soul. All this experience seems to testify to the transitoriness of the physical body, and he has often witnessed the disintegration of physical bodies that were once vibrant with life. Hence, he is naturally impelled to believe that life is conterminous with bodily existence, and the paragraph here is identification of soul with gross body. As a worldly individual considers, next para, death as the background of life. As the worldly individual considers death to be the cessation of life, he gives importance to it. There are few, however, who contemplate death for prolonged periods, and in spite of the fact that most persons are completely engrossed in their worldly pursuits, they are impressed by the incident of death when confronted by it. For most people, the earthly scene of life has as its background the inevitable and irresistible fact of death, which imperceptibly enters into the greatest triumphs and achievements, their keenest pleasures and rejoicing. Apart from being general background to the scene of life, death also assumes an accentuated and overflowing importance among the variegated incidents of life. Death falls among those happenings that are most dreaded and lamented. People in malice or anger try to inflict death upon each other as last penalty or worst revenge, or they rely upon it as the surest way of removing aggression or interference by others. People also invite death upon themselves as the token of supreme sacrifice, and at times they seek it with false hope of putting an end to all the worldly worries and problems they are unable to face or solve. Thus, in the minds of most people, death assumes an accentuated and overwhelming importance. The overwhelming importance of death is derived from man's achievement to particular forms, but death loses much of its sting and importance, even for worldly, if one takes a broader view of course of life. In spite of transitoriness, there is an unbroken continuity of life through these form, old ones being discarded and new ones being created for habitation and expression. The para here is continuity of life. The recurring incidents of death is matched by recurring incidents of birth. Old generations are replaced by new ones. Life is reborn in new forms, incessantly renewing and refreshing itself. The streams of life, with their ancient origin, are ever advancing onwards through the forms that come and go like the waves of ocean. Next para, the attachment to specific forms. So even within the limits of experience of worldly, there is much that could mitigate morbid thoughts of death as being an irreparable loss. A sane attitude towards death is possible only if life is considered impersonally and without any attachment to particular forms. This the worldly person finds difficult because of his entanglement with specific forms. For him, one form is not as good as another. The form he identifies himself with is by far the most important. The general preservation and advancement of the stream of life has for him no specific interest. What the worldly individual craves is a continuation of his own form and other particular forms with which he is entangled. His heart cannot reconcile itself to his intellect. With the vanishing of the forms that have been dear to him, he becomes a victim of unending sorrow through life as a whole, though life as a whole may have replaced elsewhere the lost forms with the new ones. The sorrow of death, on closer analysis, turns out to be rooted in selfishness. The person who loses his beloved may know intellectually that life as a whole has elsewhere compensated for the loss, but his only feeling is, what is that to me? When one looks at it from one's own personal point of view, death becomes a cause of unending sorrow. From the point of view of life in general, it is an episode of minor importance. Problems of impersonal intellect. Impersonal considerations go a long way to fortify the mind against personal sorrow caused by death, but they do not by themselves solve the wider problem that confound even the impersonal intellect of man when he considers some of the implications of death within the limitations of his ordinary experience. If death is regarded as the final annihilation of individual existence, there seems to be an irreparable loss to the universe. Each individual may be in a position to give to the universe something so unique that no one else can exactly replace it. Further, in most cases, there is cutting short of an earthly career long before the attainment of spiritual perfection by the individual. All his struggles towards the ideal and his endeavor and enthusiasm for the great, the good, and the beautiful, and all his aspirations for the things divine and eternal seem to end in the vast nothingness created by death. Next para, conflict between intellect and intuition. The implications in assuming death to be the termination of individual existence run counter to the ineradicable expectations based on rationalized intuition. A conflict usually arises between the claims of intuition and the conclusions of impure intellect, which assumes death to be the termination of individual existence. Such conflict is often a beginning of pure thinking, which immediately seriously challenges the usually accepted belief that the death is real termination of individual existence. Death as an extinction of life can never be wholly acceptable to the spiritual aspirations of man. Therefore, belief in immortality of the individualized soul is often accepted by the human mind without much resistance, even in the absence of direct, supersensible knowledge about existence of life after death. Those who know from the personal experience the immortality of the soul to be true are few. Supersensible knowledge of the existence of life after death is inaccessible to the vast majority of people. For them, immortality must remain an agreeable and acceptable belief, but nothing more. It becomes a part of personal knowledge for those who, through their interests in occult, have built up means of communication with other worlds, or those whose spatial circumstances have resulted their personality experiencing the appearance or intervention of departed spirits, or those who, through their spiritual advancement, have automatically unfolded certain latent perceptual capacities of the inner vehicles of consciousness. Immortality of the soul. Immortality of the individualized soul is made possible by the fact that individualized soul is not the same as physical body. The individualized soul continues to exist with all its sanskaras in the inner worlds through its mental and subtle bodies, even after it has discarded the gross body at the time of death. Hence, life through the medium of gross body is only a section of the continuous life of the individualized soul. The other sections of its life have their expressions in other spheres. Nature is much greater than what a person can perceive through the ordinary senses of the physical body. The hidden aspects, the para has 3 worlds. The hidden aspects of nature consist of finer matter and forces. There is no unbridgeable gulf separating the finer aspects of nature from its gross aspect. They are all interpenetrate one another and exist together. The finer aspects of nature are not perceptible to the ordinary individual, but they are nevertheless continuous with the gross aspect that is perceptible to him. They are not remote, and yet they are inaccessible to the consciousness that is functioning through the physical senses, which are not adapted for perceiving those finer aspects of nature. The ordinary person is unconscious of the inner planes, just as someone deaf is unconscious of sounds, and he cannot deal with them consciously. For all practical purposes, therefore, they are other worlds for him. The finer and hidden part of nature has 2 important divisions, namely the subtle and mental, corresponding to the subtle and mental bodies of man. The whole of nature may therefore be conveniently divided into 3 parts: the gross world, the subtle world, and the mental world. When the individualized soul has incarnated in a physical body, it expresses itself in the gross world. When it drops outer sheath, the physical body, it continues to have its expression of life either in subtle world through the subtle body or in the mental world through the mental body. Ordinarily, life in the physical body is terminated only when the sanskaras released for the expression in that incarnation are all worked out. This is effect of untimely death. In some exceptional cases, the soul gives up its gross body before the working out of the sanskaras is completed. For example, an individual who commits suicide cuts short the period of his life artificially and thereby prevents the working out of those sanskaras that were released for fructification. When due to untimely death, the sanskaras released for fructification are withheld from expression, the discarnate soul remains subject to the propelling force of the sanskaras even after the physical body has been discarded. The momentum of sanskaras that were prevented from being worked out is retained even in life after death, with the result that departed spirit greatly desires the things of the gross world. In such cases, irresistible impulsion. In such cases, the discarnate soul experiences an irresistible impulsion towards the gross world and craves gross objects so badly that it seeks gratification of its desires through the gross bodies of those souls still incarnate. Thus, for example, the discarnate soul may want so much to drink alcohol that it takes to unnatural methods of gratifying the craving. It awaits its opportunity. When it finds someone who is a suitable medium drinking alcohol in the gross world, the spirit satisfies its own desire through that person by possessing his physical body. In the same way, if it wants to experience the gross manifestations of crude anger, it does so through someone in the gross world who is feeling angry. Such souls are constantly waiting to harass incarnate persons with similar sanskaras, and they try to maintain their contact with the gross world through others as long as possible. In life after death, any lingering entanglement with the gross world is a serious hindrance to the natural flow of soul's outward life. Those who are subject to this precarious condition must be looked upon as particularly unfortunate, since they invite upon themselves and others much unnecessary suffering by seeking unnatural gratification of coarser desires through others who are still incarnate. Compared with those unfortunate souls, the posthumous life of other souls is much smoother. In natural cases, death occurs when all sanskaras, death begins interval between incarnations. In normal cases, death occurs when all the sanskaras seeking fructification are worked out. When the soul drops its physical body, it is completely severed from all connections with the gross world, though the ego and the mind are retained with all the impressions accumulated in earthly career. Unlike the exceptional cases of spirits still obsessed with the gross world, ordinary souls try to reconcile themselves to the severance from the gross world and conform to the limitations of changed conditions. They sink into a state of subjectivity in which a new process begins of mentally reviewing the experiences of the earthly career by reviving the sanskaras connected with them. Thus, death inaugurates a period of comparative cause rest, consisting in a temporary withdrawal from the gross sphere of action. It is the beginning of an interval between the last incarnation and the next. Any thoughts? Should I pause here?
Yes, sure. Any
I think
feedback?
two thoughts that I really loved was death as a simile to the wave of the sea. That was really beautiful, actually, which we can really visualize. And the other, somewhere Baba has said, death is like a sleep, where, in the normal sleep, we get up in the same body. In the death, we get up in the new body. So that's very simplistic way of explaining death. Baba has given us. Jai Baba.
Thank you.
Jai Baba.
Kama, any other comments from your side? And Sunil, I can jump in now and read it.
Yeah, please. Yeah, okay.
If you want to continue, please continue.
No, I think you are better. So for that,
no.
And for everybody's interest, I would switch back to you. I'm just trying. So I'll give it a few more tries over a period of time, and then maybe I can take over more. Let it go back to you. So should I stop presenting?
Yeah, I just took over. Can you see my screen now?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Jai Baba, I have some comments on this, the takeaways on this chapter. I think that it's a very important chapter where one of the things is about ordinarily life in the physical body is terminated only when the sanskaras released for expression in that incarnation are all worked out. And it says in normal cases, death occurs when all the sanskaras seeking fructification are worked out. So, this is an example of why some people die suddenly, and it has this particular line has helped me to understand why different people die at different times of various causes or without any cause, because it is all about that for a particular lifetime, there are certain sanskaras that we want to, dissolve. So this is almost like a plan before we even, the last line which said, death inaugurates a period of comparative rest consisting in a temporary withdrawal from the gross sphere of action. It is the beginning of an interval between the last incarnation and the next. So even before we are born, we come with a game plan, what are the sanskaras that we need to work out. And yesterday I was watching a video of a Baba lover from Los Angeles called Phyllis Frederick. She was like connected with the occult in a way. She was a very dedicated Baba lover. And it was interesting that I watched that video because it deals with this particular part that we are reading on reincarnation and karma. So I won't go deep into that. And another thing I want to mention is about one of the most important laws which we all know, that the universal law of nature is impermanence. Change is the only important thing. And the second thing is the hidden aspects of nature consist of finer matter and forces. So I think this possibly talks about the gross world, subtle world, and mental world. See, right now, we are in the gross world, and that's what we are aware of. But people who are in the the 7,000 spiritual hierarchy between the first plane and the seventh plane or the sixth plane, they are the ones who experience the subtle world and the mental world. That was my point. Jay Baba, thanks.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
and one more thing is about the discarnate souls. Why suicide is wrong? Because the soul is not finished with all its sanskaras, so it kinds of hangs around. And then I have noticed why people, when they get drunk, there are people I've noticed, of course, including me, that I can change my personality, and I think what happens is that even though we are living in the gross world, we are always surrounded by spirits. And sometimes what happens, these discarnate souls use an opportunity when they see a person who is an alcoholic and they take over the body, and that person keeps drinking and behaves in a very different personality. So this particular chapter helped me to understand that. Jai Baba.
Okay, Baba. Kamaji, would you send the link of that video that you referred?
Yeah. So that was exactly my intervention too. So please add that to the wiki in the YouTube links section, and please put a description of why you think that YouTube video is important, like we have done in all the other cases. So so that people can go and see it in their free time.
Relate.
Yeah. Second thing, Kama already mentioned about another Don Stevens video, an interview with Linda that could be relevant to our journey. So he's going to put that up as well. That's just a notification to all that go look in the wiki for some new YouTube links. Okay?
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. So I have one question for you, Kama. Maybe after that I'll also allow Mama. I think he has one more question. I have a question. So I wonder about the suicide thing in the sense that is that not part of the plan itself? In the sense, could it be that the abrupt ending was also part of the divine plan for that drop soul? So, or is it a manifestation of free will? Because Baba doesn't talk about free will anywhere. I have not seen it. But then suicide is clearly an example of use of free will.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it depends on the context or situation. And I think as a human being, we have a choice. We can't control the big picture of life. It's like being in a train, either you can sleep, read a book, but everybody is going through the same destination. You can talk to the passenger or you don't. That is your free will. That is, we can't look at it as a divine plan, because I think we have to look at the context. So from what I understand is that even people who don't commit suicide, one of the important things we have to understand, Baba said, try to remember me all the time, so that at the time of dropping your body, you will remember me, because the last impression in your mind is very important. So when what I have understood is when the individual soul is dropping its body, if it's the last impression, it's worrying about its family, it's worrying about its wealth. So that impression gets carried to the next, birth actually. So, but in terms of suicide, yes, I think people who use free will and commit suicide, definitely they have not fulfilled their sanskaric growth in that particular lifetime. Because the law of nature, the divine plan is basically that you have to fulfill or finish your sanskaras of that particular time period of that life cycle. That's very clear.
So you are saying it is a use of free will that leads to suicide?
Will determine.
Yeah, that's what it leads to. I mean, somebody will use their free will and yeah. Go ahead,
can I
Samira.
say something?
Sure.
Yeah, actually, Baba, doesn't actually, I'm also sure that Baba doesn't refer to free will anywhere, but he refers to something called his will and his wish. The difference being that there's a slight difference between his will and his wish, which, and I don't think I can explain, but I will write it down for you if you want.
Sure.
And this suicide thing is also I mean, I feel that it is something which he has also planned, because so many times there are cases in which a suicide is somebody is going to commit suicide, like in the case of his own secretary, Mr. Irani. He was there and he stopped him. So Baba can appear and stop you, but then if he doesn't stop you from it happening, it's obviously part of his divine plan, is my understanding.
Okay. Great.
No,
Thank you.
here we are trying to decide uh, on somebody's death on our judgment. Suicide, whether it is done by a person because of his end of his sanskaras working out, or it was wrong, is our judgment. So in this context, we don't know whether suicide is a part of the game by the universal force, or the individual interrupts the universal force and tries to put an end to it. I am not clear on that issue.
But Baba says that not even a leaf can move, and he very finely, he kind of plans each and every thought and everything, according to a lot of the people in the Mandali as well. So one doesn't really know. I feel that it must be part of his plan too, because he is all-knowing. So it is very difficult for me to think that he doesn't know that this person is suicidal, is going to commit suicide. So I'm sure
That's correct.
he
But
wants.
But Baba
Yeah,
has given us
maybe.
instructions to do certain things and not to do certain things. That means there is a way that, he expects us to do certain things and not to do certain things. That means he has
Yes.
given us that kind of leeway or options to choose. I mean, if I walk on the road and don't look at the road, I can, triple down on a stone, So
No, but
that I cannot blame Baba,
no, Baba
So in that
is
sense,
not to blame at all. Baba is
yeah,
part of Baba's plan for
yeah,
everything. Like a mother always stands on the side of a road and she'll help her child to cross.
yeah.
But if you're destined to have an accident, there's nothing that can stop you. Okay,
That's
you
correct.
are going to have that accident.
I
So
think
it's a
we should
mother's
not
ego.
take
It's a
I
mother's
think there are
ego.
Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead,
we
sir.
should not
It's a
take
mother's
any
ego. She
statement
thinks that
literally. I think we have to take it in context, because every context, every situation is unique. When Baba says nothing moves without my will, yes, if you look at the big picture of this whole existence, it is all illusion, Maya. Anyway, as soon as the whim starts, the whole thing is a grand illusion. So in that sense, existence, we are all actors. So I believe that when you look at the big picture from top down, right from, we are Atmas, we are part of the Paramatma. And this consciousness is just going through this play. We have been put through this play. So in a way, like Baba is a manifestation of existence, you know. So I think we are getting too identified with the form of Baba rather than looking at the whole laws of nature and how this whole thing works.
I
That's
have a
my
question. Okay, I want to say a few lines here. Uh, uh, this one, as far as suicide is concerned, going by Baba's text and even just now what we read, it is very clear that suicide is not a part of divine plan. uh, yeah, Baba said that yeah, everything moves with my permission and all that, but there is a certain freedom, like Kama was explaining, there's certain freedom given to souls when they are on this planet Earth. They have a certain freedom to respond, to do things that they are doing here. Either they can waste their time, or they can pursue, or they can do whatever they want. So that freedom is available, but in Baba's world, the planet Earth is just one of the worlds. So it is not that everything is only this planet and the gross body is the only sphere that he looks at. for him, everything is together. Like even this sphere, subtle or mental, all are part of one world for him. The opportunity is given that we do something in this world and fructify those sanskaras, like Baba was saying. If you do not, if you abruptly stop the life, then you go into the subtle sphere and mental sphere and all that is Baba's world. All this is God's creation and we'll be there. So literally going by what Baba said in Baba's sentences and what Baba is telling, suicide is not his plan. Suicide is human intervention.
Jai Baba, I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vidya. Just a quick comment. Whatever you did now on the technology was perfect. Your audio and video were great. So stick to the same place.
Yesterday,
Namita, your turn.
I actually rebooted my laptop and then I did all the updates. I think after
Okay.
that started.
Okay. Awesome. Great.
Thank you.
This was impeccable. Namita.
Okay, my question is, those people on a death sentence, is it Baba's will or is the judge to be blamed?
It is a human intervention. It is not God's intervention. It is human intervention. But in some places, maybe the Baba comes as judge. Probably you can also say that. But I think death sentence is better than suicides because someone else is deciding it. When you decide it yourself, I mean, this is something which is not mentioned anywhere about death sentences in the book, so I can't refer to. But books definitely talk about, say, suicide is not God's intervention. So this death sentence, I cannot comment right away because I would be speaking from my mind and I don't want to do that as of now. So maybe someday when I get clarification and I know a little more about it, I'll come back. To my mind, as of now, it looks like death sentence is partially Baba's intervention, but somewhere people can also play games with it and all that stuff. So I can't comment about it right away. I'll come back if there's something coming up.
Thank you.
My
very much, Jai Baba.
understanding about the death sentence is that no human being or society has the right to take anybody's life, even if it's an execution. It's
True,
okay
that's
for that individual to be under life imprisonment. That is okay, but we don't have the right to execute that person. This is my understanding.
No. Could
If I can summarize this in a different way, everybody is working out their sanskaras. This
Yes.
term working out, which is used in the text, has a real different meaning. Working out means it may be negative, it may be positive. We are sort of working out whatever is our sanskaras. Either we are expending that completely and then going out of this sphere, or we are adding to it, or if we are in the plane of, say, evolution properly, we are reducing our sanskaras in future also. In that way, in that context, whatever happens is the will of God. That is how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Jai Baba.
I'm sorry I started a wild goose chase. But I think
Okay.
as you go through the rest of the day, please think of all the things that Kama and Vidya said, right? So both are right. It is, I think, our view to look at this with a sense of proportions. The leaf cannot move without his will. But then there are people that do things that at the same time, there is an element of free will that a soul enjoys after coming into a life in the reincarnation, and hence can do silly stuff, right? So I think this is a profound thought. This thought between philosophically, the thought between fatalism, which is saying, hey, I don't do anything, I just go through everything, right? I'm not in control. To the other point is the train example, the brilliant example of Kama, which is the train. I am on a train, so there is some amount of control I wield. I can go to the restroom, I can stand up, I can sit down, but I cannot jump off. I can't stop the train, right? So there is some amount of structure that the divine plan provides with lot of flexibility. So I think I'll leave all of you to think about this through the rest of the day. And there are no straight answers. Like Vidya and Kama said, this is something that we have to respect both views, and there's no clear answer. And that's why I was struggling, and I thought we will discuss it.
Karthik, I have one more comment. When we look at artificial intelligence, okay, somehow it came to my mind. This is something a thought for everybody if you can look into it. Most of the time we work with passive computers, all the software programs which does its work. But today we know artificial intelligence is making the computer so smart that it's becoming better than the human being.
Yes.
So this is something, that I wanted
Brilliant.
to see what is the equivalent to the human being.
Brilliant. Because artificial intelligence is use of free will. It's brilliant, man. So you give some structure, and then there is something that code, the software code, does by itself. And I think something good to think for the rest of the day. Very, very good point.
I think one has to, I also would like to add that it is important to know what is man-made and what is God-made. Yes. Artificial intelligence is not God-made, it is man-made. So even when we talk about a lot of destruction that is happening, the destruction mostly happens, for example, the factories, the Vizag incident, gas leakage incident happened. A lot of incidents happened because of the man-made stuff. The God's creation is perfect. No accidents so much happen. And when they happen for a purpose, and that will happen at a scale that no one can even imagine. So a lot of distractions or a lot of things are happening. Probably man's creation is not perfect. God's creation is perfect according to me.
Very well added. Very good comment. If I have the permission of everybody, we can continue. If there's more to discuss, happy to continue. Okay, then
I am done.
Okay, so reincarnation and karma part 2. So is this size okay, or do we want it bigger or not? Okay. So part 2, hell and heaven. Request all the others to go on mute if you're not already done so. The section is called subjectivity of life after death. After death, there is no consciousness of the gross world for the ordinary soul, since such consciousness is directly dependent on the physical body. Though the consciousness of the gross world is thus lost, the impressions of the experiences of the gross world are retained in the mental body, and they continue to express themselves through the semi-subtle world. During the interval between death and the next incarnation, the consciousness of the soul is turned toward these impressions, resulting in a vivification of impressions and revival of corresponding experiences. However, this soul does not become aware of the subtle environment. It is wrapped up in complete subjectivity and absorbed in living through the revived impressions. Vivification continues to haunt us, but here I think it's Sanjay's explanation. It's vivid, so it's made vivid. So hell and heaven states, next section. In life after death, the experiences of pain and pleasure become much more intense than they were in earthly life. These subjective states of intensified suffering and joy are called hell and heaven. Hell and heaven are states of mind. They should not be looked upon as being places. And though subjectively they mean a great deal to the individualized soul, they are both illusions within the greater illusion. Desires and experiences intensified after death. In the hell state, as well as in the heaven state, desires become much more intense since they no longer require expression through the gross medium. Like desires, the experiences incurred in their fulfillment or non-fulfillment also become greatly intensified. In the earthly career desires, as well as the pleasures and the sufferings they bring, are experienced through the medium of the gross body. The soul is, of course, actually using its higher bodies at the same time but in the earthly career, its consciousness is bound up with the gross body. Therefore, the processes of consciousness have to pass through an additional wheel that lessens their force, liveliness, and intensity, just as rays of light are dimmed when they are required to pass through a thick glass. During habitation in the body, desires and experiences suffer a deterioration in intensity, but when that habitation is given up, they undergo a relative increase of intensity. Fulfillment of desires through thought. In the heaven state, the fulfillment of desires is not, as in the gross sphere, dependent upon having the object of desire. Fulfillment of desires comes merely through thinking of the object desired. For example, if a person wishes to hear exquisite music, he experiences this pleasure merely by thinking about it. The imaginative idea of exquisite music becomes in this state a substitute for the physical sound vibrations in the gross sphere. The pleasure he derives from the thought of exquisite music is much greater than the pleasure he derived in his earthly career from the actual hearing of physical sounds. In the heaven state, there are no obstacles between desires and their fulfillment. The pleasure of self-fulfillment through thought or feeling is always at hand. Heaven on earth. In fact, even in the earthly sphere of existence, some individuals develop this capacity of making their pleasure independent of possession of a gross object. Beethoven, for example, was completely deaf, and yet, through the exercise of imagination alone, he was able to enjoy intensely his own compositions of music. In a sense, even on earth, he might figuratively be said to have been in the heaven state. In the same way, a person who meditates on the beloved with love derives happiness merely through the thought of the beloved without requiring his physical presence. After death, in the heaven state, the enjoyment of such imaginative fulfillment is infinitely greater, since consciousness is then unburdened of the outermost veil of the gross body. Coarser desires contribute to hell state. Some desires have a direct relation to the possession and assimilation of gross objects through the gross body. The coarser desires, such as lust, gluttony, or the craving for alcohol or drugs, are of this type. These desires are specifically earthly because they are possessive and they involve an element of clinging to the physical object. In these desires, there is not only a preponderance of sensations derived from contact with the object, but also of those sensations that constitute the response of the body itself. These coarser desires contribute to the hell state. Difference between coarser and finer desires. In contrast with finer desires, the coarser desires place an infinitely heavier premium on mere sensations, quite independently of any intellectual meaning or moral value. In the finer desires, such as the desire for music, there is of course an element of wanting sense contact with the physical sounds. But these sounds become important not so much in their own right as in their capacity to express beauty. In the same way, a desire to hear discourses has a hold upon the mind, not so much because of the sensations of sound, but because of the intellectual meaning and emotional appeal they convey. Bodily sensations of coarser desires. Thus, in the finer desires, the actual sensations play a subordinate role to the derivative aspects based upon the sensations. In the coarser desires, the chief element is provided by the actual sensations connected with the physical object and the sensations aroused by them through bodily response to their possession. The organic sensations of the physical body play the greatest part in experiences connected with the coarser desires. Through them, the individualized soul feels its own existence as the gross body much more effectively and vividly than through experiences connected with finer desires. almost the entire significance of experiences brought about by the fulfillment or non-fulfillment of coarser desires is constituted by the bodily sensations themselves. Therefore, they can rarely yield the full experience of fulfillment achieved through finer desires merely by the exercise of thought and imagination. So the heading of this section is Sufferings of Hell and Pleasures of Heaven. It is characteristic of the coarser desires to insist on the possession and assimilation of the gross objects themselves. Any imaginative idea of the gross objects merely serves the purpose of accentuating the urge to reach out to them. Since the gross objects of the coarser desires are not available in the semi-subtle world, these desires are mostly productive of an intensified experience of the suffering of non-fulfillment. Just as in the gross world, the presence of coarser desires leads to the preponderance of suffering over pleasure in the life after death. In the life after death, the revived experiences connected with these coarser desires also lead to a preponderance of suffering over pleasure, thus bringing into existence the hell state. Similarly, in the life after death, the revived experiences connected with the finer desires lead to a preponderance of pleasure over suffering, thus bringing into existence the heaven state. Time in semi-subtle world. Hell and heaven are both states of bondage, however, and subject to the limitations of the opposites of pleasure and pain. Both are states whose duration is determined by the nature, amount, and intensity of the accumulated impressions. Time in the semi-subtle world is not the same as time in the gross world due to the increased subjectivity of the states of consciousness. Though time in the semi-subtle world is thus incommensurable with time in the gross world, it is strictly determined by the impressions accumulated in the gross world. However, the important fact is that the hell state and the heaven state are far from being lasting, and after they have served their purpose in the life of the individualized soul, they both come to an end.
Karthik, I just have a question. May I ask?
Sure.
The semi-subtle world, this has come a couple of times. I would appreciate if somebody could differentiate or throw some light on the semi-subtle world, because we have heard about the gross, subtle, and mental, but this is a little new term or new.
So actually, it's in the glossary, and we read it yesterday. It is an alternate for what's the page I'm in? 331.
Astral world.
Yeah, it's an alternate word for astral. So I'll read out in the glossary. Semi-subtle. Yeah. Gross and semi-subtle. Yeah, semi-subtle world. A stage between the gross and subtle spheres in which the disembodied soul experiences the heaven and hell states through the astral body.
Got it.
And also when he explains astral body, he says it's temporary. So it's temporary and it's between the spheres. Again, glad you asked this question. This again underlines how different masters have different vocabularies, right? So nobody will understand semi-subtle if I go and talk about it outside. So it's important for us to use the same vocabulary and constructs that a master uses in all his books and get comfortable and just focus on that to better our understanding. And I hope I'm making my point and people will understand in the context of what I'm saying this. Because getting too many vocabularies together, it will always complicate our understanding, and that I'm very conscious of. So I'm careful in using the words, right? 1 second. Vivification, that's where we were.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And also you can look at God Speaks in the glossary, in the supplement. Mm-hmm. The last supplement is the world of the astral. So I don't need to read it, but you can check in God Speaks. In the last part of the supplement, there is an explanation of the world of the astral.
In fact, so one of the last supplements.
Yeah.
One of the last supplementary notes, yes.
It's page number 275.
Good. Thanks.
Okay. Vivification of impressions.
Comment here.
Sure.
This is in the process of reincarnation. We have a temporary phase. But in the actual involution phase, you are moving from the gross to the subtle to the mental. So that progression is different. And this is a temporary progression between the incarnations.
Perfect. Important distinction. I hope everybody is understanding what Mama just said. That's my understanding. I think.
Perfect.
Yes.
Sorry, Mamaji, could you please repeat it?
We have the process of reincarnation. That is birth and death. We take different cycles of birth and death to expend our all the sanskaras. So
Yes.
in this phase, after the death, we go to a temporary phase. The astral body carries these vasanas in the subtle vasanas and mental vasanas, and they are expended either in the hell or the heaven state, not in the place. So this temporary place is related to the reincarnation, not to be confused as involution process where we are going to the ascend, where we are ascending towards the subtle world and the mental world. That's how I look at it. Kama, you have any comment on this?
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. Perfectly said, because in that part in the supplement on astral body, I'll just read these two paragraphs. It says, after disembodiment, the soul experiences the world of the astral in the astral body. This may be said to be the astral journey of the soul. When the soul gets embodied, the astral body is shed, and with the new gross body, it gets a fresh astral body. But as long as it does not get embodied, its subtle and mental bodies undergo the experiences of the state of heaven or hell through the medium of the astral body, in accordance with the impressions that were accumulated while it was in an embodied state. The spiritual path begins only with the involution of consciousness, when the soul begins to experience the first plane of the subtle world, and not when it just has access to the astral phenomena from the gross world. At the stage when the soul experiences fully the first plane of the subtle world, the astral sheath that linked the subtle with the gross is snapped for good. So I think your point is correct, that when you're in the involution stage, there is no.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Okay. I think we are almost out of time. We'll read a couple of paragraphs. The vivification of impressions. The coarser sensual desires like lust and their emotional products like hate and anger all contribute to the life of delusion and suffering prevalent in the hell state. The finer desires like idealistic aspirations, aesthetic and scientific interests, goodwill towards neighbors and others, and their emotional products like personal love or fellow feeling contribute to the life of enlightenment and pleasure prevalent in the heaven state. These states, for most souls, consist in reliving the experiences of the earthly life by vivification of the impressions left by them. Their duration and nature are dependent upon the duration and nature of the experiences undergone by the soul while in the physical body. So I think with that, we will call it a day. May all of you have a great day coming up, and as I said, make use of all those links, the YouTube links. They are all useful in our journey, and I think this has been a great team. We ask the right questions, we get the right answers, and Kama is always giving us those references in a minute. So I just like what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Perfect. I have. Can you just do me one favor? Can you just paste the links in the chat, because I can never find them, and I find it very difficult to see the videos.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you,
Sure,
Jai
sure.
Baba. Thank
Sure.
you.
All right.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Anything else? That's it.
Jai
Okay.
Baba.
Jai Baba. Have a good day.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba. Yeah.
Jai Baba.
Good day. Yeah. Jai Baba.